Welcome to TBL Scope. I'm Kyle Koster. I'm here with Brian Giuffra. That man in the other box, he watched a lot of the NFL draft this weekend. He had it circled on his calendar. He was so excited for the resumption of sports with the outcome in doubt. And he's going to come on and he wants to talk about some of the stuff that he saw, that he liked, some of the stuff that he didn't like, and more importantly, what can the NFL take away from this unusual draft and use it to drafts in the future, hopefully when we return to some normalcy? Let's start there, Brian. What were your big takeaways from the broadcast of the draft?
You know, Kyle, to me, this actually felt like more of an NFL draft broadcast, whereas in the past couple of years, it's almost turned into more of like a party. Oh, and by the way, these people are getting drafted. And even those celebrations with Goodell, the jumping, the chest bumping, like it got like almost too much the last couple of years. And I thought that this was actually getting back to the point of the broadcast, which is to draft players, to evaluate how the teams that picked them, how do they fit into that. I thought that was really interesting. Excuse me. I thought the analysts were really insightful, and it was so cool seeing, Daniel Jeremiah on there with Mel Kiper. I really love that dynamic of having guys from different networks on one broadcast discussing things. You're going from like Kurt Warner and Michael Irvin, like, and you're hearing from the ESPN guys. And I just thought like that dynamic to me felt like more exciting to hear from more people simultaneously. Obviously, it meant that you lost some of the banter that you used to have, but it's kind of hard because when you're not face to face, when you're not in the same room, you don't have that banter that I really love between Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. Obviously, Todd McShay couldn't make it because he's battling COVID right now. But I did miss that element. I understand why they didn't do it this year, but beyond that, I just thought you got to look into these people's homes. I mean, Jerry Jones on a yacht, that was like just so and his girlfriend or whoever that was answering the phone for him and literally just putting it up to his face. I just thought there were so many little moments like that I'll remember more than like a shot, like a quick turn away to a celebrity who has nothing to do with the NFL talking about the NFL draft, or, a country music band playing, which like, I get why the NFL went that way. They've had a lot of success with that in other avenues, but I think the NFL draft is about the players. I think the NFL draft is about the teams that are drafting them and how those players fit in. And I felt like this really hit the mark there. The one area that you and I were talking about before this was some of those cards where they were really focusing on the players, like some of the hardships the players have gone through. I understand why they were trying to do that. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, there was a big topic of discussion, and you understand what the goal was. The goal was to humanize these kids and to make it more because they were going to be having this happening at their homes. It's intensely more personal, right? And so it's more of a human interest angle. And then you could see that's kind of why they devoted the ABC feed to that. It was like, we're telling stories about these kids. And I think that is a fine endeavor. That's a good pursuit. I think that the danger is that it hits those a little like insensitive, right? And it got to be repetitive after the first like 6 or whatever. You're seeing the theme here, and it became a joke. But maybe the thing to really consider, and this is like a bigger real world thing, is like, okay, well, all these people are coming back from personal tragedy or terrible things in their past or circumstances like economically that are really bad, and this is the one thing they have to save themselves, right? And then they're all turning to football as like this kind of like savior thing to lift themselves and their families out of the situation they've been in, or to fill a hole like emotionally in their life. It's really interesting, like what it kind of said for the bigger picture of football, whereas it meets into society. Of course, you can't have that conversation in the midst of a draft, right? So you're not able to get to the heart of it. But I think that there was no ill will. But I also think that the people at home were you could be forgiven for being like, okay, well, this feels like a little exploitative. And I'm sure not every single one of those players would have preferred. I'm not sure every single one of them liked the way that their story was presented. You can't bat 1,000 on that. I did want to go back to the thing you said about how this seemed, seeing the coaches and the players in their element. And the analogy I would make was, normally the NFL draft is a graduation, right? Where you all crowd into an auditorium, and one by one you cross the stage and you shake the principal's hand. Basically, they're doing that with Goodell about where they're being picked, and everything is kind of sanitized to the point where it all looks the same. It's homogenous. But where you get the difference is when you go to the grad parties, right? The grad parties, you go to this person's house and you get to see where they live. You get to see what they're serving for food. You get a better picture of the people in their lives that led them to this point. So I think that it was a richer, more complex picture that they were able to do. Maybe the biggest thing to talk about now is this was a monumental lift for the NFL and its broadcast partners. And I think that they acquitted themselves super well. There was a lot of trepidation about the kind of like the blocking and tackling of this event going forward. But outside of a few hiccups, I thought they really could have done as well as could possibly be expected. We could start at the top. Trey Wingo, not the splashiest broadcaster, I would say, not a guy who's got a universally high and lauded Q score, but I thought he was the perfect guy to be in this role.
Yeah, I mean, Trey Wingo probably came out as the biggest star of this whole thing, even in those moments where, he cuts off Adam Schefter saying that a pick's in and then just like 30 seconds. And then he kind of pivoted right away from that. I was extremely impressed by him. I already mentioned some of the other analysts that I was impressed by. I think on a day-to-day basis, those guys just really kind of stand out to me. The people we haven't talked enough about are the producers. All those people who are in Bristol, with the masks on, doing the social distancing, dealing with the pressures of going into an office, which I know, Bristol isn't New York City, but still you're going into an office, you're kind of putting yourself in that position. You're thinking about your family and all the other things. I was so impressed by the job that they did. Obviously some of those graphics you mentioned, some of them were, and ESPN even apologized for, I think one of them at least. But I thought they did such an amazing job, the producers. You have 380 plus feeds coming in. You're switching to the right ones at the appropriate times. The way that this came off was as good as you absolutely could have expected. By the way, there's miscues in any draft, right? There are mess ups in every draft, but like the way that this was conducted to me really felt just so powerful, and it actually did give us an opportunity to kind of think about something for a little bit. Obviously the slow lead in, I didn't love that. The 15 minutes that it took from the start of the broadcast where they're kind of hammering home what we're all going through right now. And that felt like a little bit like almost they were trying too hard. But then as soon as the actual drafting happened, like I said, it felt like what it's supposed to be, which is an NFL draft of celebrating these players who are having this moment in their house. I really love that. The only thing that stunk is I thought it would be like a graduation party. You brought it up. I thought it would be even better. Chase Young was on the Dan Patrick show, and he said that he was going to have like 20 people outside of his house and that he was getting it catered so that they could all like celebrate together in a distance. That would be something that would be cool for future drafts, is like these guys staying at home. And it's almost like that Brett Favre photo of like him and his whole family, and like, this is what they do. Brett Favre wore jean shorts, at that time. It was really personal and it felt personal. Trey Wingo, as you brought up, just handled it perfectly. Roger Goodell, listen, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, Las Vegas Raiders 2020-22 debacle wasn't great, but like beyond that, like he actually did a pretty solid job. I thought, given the circumstances, that every single person was going to be looking at him and that every person was going to be judging him. I thought he came off as about as well as you can when people already go into that with a personal dislike for you. And then the final thing that I'll say about the draft is I really enjoyed having a moment where we could debate something that actually mattered. This wasn't Jordan versus LeBron for the 500 millionth time. This was, did the Giants make a mistake? Did the Packers, what does this mean for Aaron Rodgers? It's actual tangible things. And so there was definitely some, especially from me about a month ago when they were saying we're going forward with the draft. And at the time, we didn't know it was going to happen. It seemed like this was going to be the worst part of it. And actually now it seems like we're at the flattening point, which is good. The NFL was steadfast in its belief that this was going to help, Americans take their mind off of what was going on. and I agreed with them in the end. So they win once again, and I just thought they did a really fabulous job overall.
Yeah, I agree. I wrote that I thought that they were making a mistake, and I'm not so sure that they weren't. I mean, my impression is that it was fine, and kind of what happened is I started thinking about, well, what happens if they wait, right? Well, waiting doesn't solve all these issues. Waiting already only brings like a higher death total, and there's just never going to be a good time for it. I know that that's not like the right answer, but I think if you look at like the cold calculus of it, waiting wouldn't have done anything. And I think once we got it past that opening thing, which I felt didn't fit, I thought it was fine, and it was something that gave people reason to watch. And again, yeah, it's great to be able to discuss something as trivial as the New York Giants offensive line pick. That felt good, and it felt normal. And it was like, look, we're going to have to figure out a way to do these things going forward, because even people who are taking it the most seriously and are the most affected, like, life is going to go on.
I want to interrupt you. I've spoken with 9 people about the Giants draft. 9 people. So just to give you like an idea of how excited I've been, that I can just continue. Oh, it's all separate conversations. So.
Well, look at this guy, extremely plugged in. So what would be some things that they could take from this learning experience in your mind and use for the future?
Yeah, I really think take away the pomp and circumstance of what happened in Nashville. And I thought the Nashville draft was amazing. This isn't taking away what Nashville did or what the NFL did in Nashville, but like, do I need a screen that's the size of a stadium? Do I need live music? Do I need celebrities from that area coming on stage during the draft and talking about it? Do I need all of these distractions, or would I prefer to have more of the insight about the player? To your point, it got a little repetitive when they kept hammering home all of like the human interests, but maybe you sprinkle those in a little bit more intermittently, and then you focus on the actual player, like their skill set and what makes them different. I thought that was really good. Like I said, I loved having the different broadcasters from the different networks on one singular feed. I thought that was really good. I would just like to see it be about the players and about the teams, and I don't need, all the other bells and whistles that come along with it. And I think the other thing that I would say is I really, really enjoyed the insight to the coaches and the GMs. That probably stood out the most to me about things that maybe you can't do it every time or every year, but like just seeing, like, even Mike Vrabel's thing, like, it was so bizarre and weird. And obviously people were like, what's that guy doing in the background? They thought he was on the toilet. It wasn't. I saw the video of him. It's definitely not on the toilet. But like, that was just like, I never knew Mike Vrabel had a sense of humor at all, because he's a Patriots guy. And you see him on the sideline during a Sunday. And I mean, the guy is about as hard looking as you can get. Like, he looks like he could go play, defense right now. He could go and make a tackle right now. But then you see that him and his family had fun with this. And I thought that was really cool. Jerry Jones, again, like, I just felt that was so perfect. Jerry Jones, it was like an encapsulation of him. The guy, we're in quarantine, and where does the guy go? To his mega yacht. And, he's a billionaire. He kind of lives that James Bond villain lifestyle, and it like epitomized him. So I would love to see it be about football, be about the players, be about the teams, but then also provide those little insights about the individual coaches, players, GMs, et cetera.
Well, I agree with all it. I mean, it is such a hard thing to do. Like, if you were to set it on, give me a sheet of paper and say, here's your goal. You need to humanize NFL head coaches and particularly general managers, and then additionally Roger Goodell. I'd be like, well, that's going to be a pretty tall ask. That's going to be very difficult for me to do. And this draft did it. And I thought it was great seeing inside their house and seeing like the Spartan decor and being like how on brand some of the houses were for the people, like Kingsbury, of course, that's where he lives. Like, it was just made a lot of sense to really see that. And I like players more, and I like coaches more after seeing this. And I think I'm not saying we should, they're not heroes or anything. They're not, shouldn't be lauded. And of course, like, I think they're actually covered a little bit too much with kid gloves when it comes to the way that they're compensated. But it's like, I like them more after seeing what their home situation, where I got to see that humanity. And I think that that's the big thing that gets lost in any type of thing that, like, talking about, well, maybe the graphics didn't jibe, whatever. They did a really good job making everybody in there feel like just a person. And for the NFL to take itself even 20% less seriously is a thing I never thought I would see. So I will put my hand up and I will say I was wrong about it, and I'm impressed. And I think that it's really awesome because I thought that even the pace of everything felt better when it got into like the second or third days. It felt like we were just, something was happening and they were coming on and they were reacting to picks. Maybe they were a few behind, and like either you could follow on Twitter so you had the most real-time information, or you could just relax and have it on at your house and be like, okay, they'll show me the pick and tell me about it when they get to it. There's no real urge for me to have to know exactly what pick 198 was, right? Pick 198 is going to be that way in perpetuity. So I feel like I can wait another 120 seconds. So I thought that was really good. Any closing thoughts that we didn't get to?
No, I mean, I honestly, and also you notice that the coaches talked about liking to be home. Now, I mean, I think they kind of have to say that, right? Like, it's almost like, well, what are you going to say, right? I didn't like being with my kids extra time. But now they're also talking about doing like virtual off-season programs. The Saints already said we're not doing anything in in our actual facility. Everything's going to be remote. I love that, and I agree with you completely that you like somebody like Mike Vrabel, who I never felt any connection to ever before. Not only because I'm not a Patriots fan, but also he just never seemed like a likable guy. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I like Mike Vrabel now. So I agree with you completely. They did a great job. ESPN producers, everybody just really nailed it top to bottom.
Agreed. NFL draft. Well, they got headlines. They did well. We'll try to figure out what's next. We don't really know. Presumably something will come about. That's been TBL Scope. I'm Kyle Koster. That's Brian Giuffra. Thanks for watching.